So we put it together. They all came. We did the draft. We had two leagues, two 12-team leagues the first year. Um, it was a huge success. We were like King's Classic, was literally trending on Twitter that day. It was so much stuff and hype and social media love.
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we are joined by Bob Lung, the brains behind the Fantasy Football Expo. We had to learn how he was a baseball phenom at the early age of 9 and how he has grown into running the largest gathering of fantasy football fans in North America. Let's go ahead and hop into our conversation with him now. Enjoy. Hey guys, it's me, Travis of the How I Got Here podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Bob Lung, the brains, the mastermind behind the Fantasy Football Expo. Now, I know that I kind of just went over that last part there, but in a quick 10 to 15 second high level overview, beyond just being the mastermind of the Fantasy Football Expo, kind of give us a few seconds to where you're at right now in 2026, what you're working on in more depth, if you will.
Yeah. So, every year, at least over the last number of years, it's been the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. Last year was the 10th year anniversary. This year will be 11th year. Been nominated 9 straight years by Fantasy Sports Writers of America as one of the best publications, won the award 2018. As you mentioned, the expo coming up this summer, moving the dates. So everybody out there, the dates are moving, July 24th to 26th this year, not the second weekend in August. So that's 100% where I'm at outside of my regular day job, which I'm a CPA by day. So
We're going to get to that in just a little bit, but let's go rewind as much as possible. I'm talking about how young you were and how you were thinking about things in terms of like, what was the first thing that you had an extreme amount of interest in? What's the first thing, or maybe the first thing you wanted to be when you grew up, and what was what was kind of the age range of that?
uh I'm assuming that when I was young, I was like every other kid in the late 60s. That's 1960s, folks. So, astronaut, teacher, fireman, whatever you wanted to be, cowboy, I don't know, everybody wants to be something. I don't remember specifically thinking I was planning that. I was just kind of being a kid day by day. There was no cable, there was no internet, there was no video games. I played a lot of baseball between ages of 9 through 12. My local baseball team was out over a 4 year period, 88 and 4. We won 4 straight titles in our area. I actually won a county championship champions back-to-back years, and it's never been done since. And I lived in a little town called East Sparta, which had maybe 500 people total. So that was what I remember as my first. Um, it's where I learned about working hard to be a winner, really set, because that's what our coaches were all about, is we can be the best, but you have to work hard to do it. So if you made a mistake, you ran laps. I mean, stuff that if you did that to kids today, they literally would fire you in a heartbeat. But we won. And, I certainly was no star of the team, but I was the fastest and I led off and I stole a lot of bases and I made a lot of people very angry because we used to do planned rundowns. Like literally, my coach would just say, go. And my goal was to get in a rundown. They'd overthrow the ball and I would go from first to home and just throw the other team in just a tear panic. And I had a blast. And, so for a kid who was really didn't have much going on in life, all of a sudden being part of a winning team for 4 straight years, and it just really sunk in that of course, still to this day, I'm ultra competitive.
And
And so
how
that
old were you again
really, I think, was the thing.
when this baseball started? Did you say it was high school?
No, 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 no. This was like Little League farm team. It was like 8 years old, 9 years old to 12 years old. So 9, 10, 11, 12.
And so this being the first, like, oh, hey, there's actually something that I'm really, really good at. I like this. During that 9 to 12 period, because you guys, I mean, that like that winning percentage is crazy. Because you guys
Yeah.
were doing so good, was it, whether it was somebody else putting this idea in your head, or you coming up with this idea yourself, was it ever like, hey, I want to keep doing this. I like winning. I like baseball. I'm going to keep doing this because at 12, like that's right before, high school. Was that the main thing going on in your head in terms of what a potential future can look like?
The perfect answer for this scenario would be yes, but the easy answer for me was no. And here's why. Um, at that point, I knew that baseball was going to be tougher. I was a very small kid. I never really grew till I got into my high school years. And so I knew that I was not going to be big enough, tall enough to move on and really be a force in the next level. I was good for where I was. I was a good portion of the team, but I knew that that wasn't my thing. Now let's also throw in the fact that my dad at this point got into playing golf. And he played golf all the time. And so did my grandmother, and so did my grandfather. So my dad worked afternoons. So the first summer that I didn't play baseball, my dad's like, I'm going to teach you how to play golf. Okay, cool. And so since he worked afternoons and my grandma and grandpa were basically retired, we went to the golf course every day all summer, played 18 holes of golf. We'd come home, he'd go to work, repeat, rinse next day. So by the end of my first summer of playing golf, I went from being okay to beating my dad already. And all of a sudden, that became my new passion because the good thing about golf is it's you against you. So there is no, the team needs to do better, the pitcher needs to throw better. It's all on me. And so that winning, dedication, work hard thing that I learned in baseball, I now brought to golf. And by the time I was a senior in high school, my 9 hole average was like 37. I was at like, like a 3 or 4 handicap. And then that became my new passion for the next 5 to 7 years or 5 to 6 years.
I like when you're talking about your the mindset you had and the fun you had with that team sport of also crushing it in the team sport and then being like, okay, now it's all up to me. I control my own destiny here. One of the things I love about the show is like when I get just things, recalls, mental recalls of, oh, hey, I remember when I was in a similar situation like that, but mine was very different. It wasn't baseball, it was football, and we were the
Mm.
not good team. We were the horrible team. And so it became, and on a horrible team, I rode the bench. That's how bad everything was in my in the football high school side of things. But I quickly discovered an individual sport. It wasn't golf, it was competitive weightlifting. I was in control
Nice.
of how much work I put in, and if I was the strongest person, there's no bench situation. If you're the strongest person,
Correct.
you win. And so I was like, okay, so the coach is not a fan of me over here, or the coach is just not a good coach. This is a sport that is all up to me. And I mean, I put in so much crazy work, and I got to a point where, I'm competing for, breaking school records and stuff for my weight class. But that's kind
Oh, nice.
of that was my recall with the golf thing. And on the other thing I would say about golf is there are two things that if I am confident if I got into an early age that I would be pretty decent now just based on how I know my skill set and my drive, and
Mhm.
it's chess and golf. Like I know that every kid knows
Well,
about chess early on, but I never played it ever. And now looking at it, I go, man, like based on how I know my skills have developed over my life, if I started chess at like age 10, age 12, I feel like I'd be a great chess player right now. I saw you
so do
raise
you
your
want me to tell
hand.
you about my chess
Yeah,
career?
so you raise your hand, so you can go ahead.
So I played checkers a lot against my grandfather when I was young. And then I learned chess at about probably 8, 9, 10 years old. Because I was small and too small to play football, too small to play basketball, and I wasn't on the golf team in eighth grade, I joined the high school chess team because chicks dig high school chess players. And yeah, I was actually on the varsity chess team as an eighth grader and did really well again for all the way through high school. And I enjoyed playing. And again, it was a sport, whatever, a thing that you could play that I could learn and be better at and watch others and, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so it's funny you bring that up because that was my two best things in high school was golf and chess. So obviously, I had dates almost never.
Let's say, well, there's three things we have in common. It's
Yeah.
well, chess and golf, not that we have in common, but things that I
Yeah.
probably would be really good at. But also creating not just events, but just creating companies in general, because you definitely crushed it. And with Fantasy Football Expo, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So now let's kind of get back on the chronological train. We play baseball, we crush baseball, we love baseball. Then there's a gap year between ending baseball, and then I believe you said you started again in high school, but you knew that your size was not elite, so it wasn't something you knew you were going to be able to do afterwards. Then you
Right.
pick up, this chess thing, and so, hey, some schools chicks dig chess. All right, I don't know what schools those are, but I'm sure they exist. But the question I
Yeah.
had about chess is at this high school level, because my school may have had one, I have no idea. Uh, I know like on chess.com, and to be like a grandmaster and all this other stuff, there's like this 4-digit score keeping kind of, or 3 to 4 digit score. Is that something in high school? Is that what gets you to be a varsity chess player, because your overall chess rating gets to a certain amount, or how does that work?
They didn't have that kind of stuff back then. Basically, you're on the high school chess team because they needed enough players to make up 5 to 8 members of the team to go and play. I never had a ranking. I don't even know if I had a win-loss record. Basically, it was 5 varsity players of my high school would play against 5 varsity players at the other high school. And there was a 1 through 5 ranking. So the number one players would play number one, two versus two, three, four. So that was kind of how it worked. Um, I will say, believe it or not, there was strategy to this. If the number one player was so good that our number one player didn't think he could beat them. Now, this our number one player was amazing. Like I think he had a rating or he played in major like local regional tournaments. He was really good. But there was one guy that he would not play against because he knew he would lose. So I was the sacrificial lamb who had to play him, and then everybody else moved down a notch. And I have to tell the story because I still remember this to this day. So we went to this high school. I'm going against this guy. Now, this guy and our number one guy read books like there's all these strategies and different openings and all this kind of stuff. And I don't remember all the stuff. So this guy was very, way in depth, right? And there's a very simple 4 move checkmate in chess that most people know. It's, move the pawn out, move the bishop over, move the queen over, take the pawn, boom, checkmate. And if you're not paying attention, you could get swindled, but it doesn't happen. Most people don't fall for it, except this dude. He was so focused on playing the middle game that he wasn't watching what I was doing, and I checkmated him, and the place went crazy because he was stunned because he didn't pay attention because he just assumed he knew I was the number 5 guy. And so I just remember like him
So
just
this
like,
was you versing the number one guy, the guy
yeah,
that
yeah,
your number one was afraid to verse, and he was
right.
just, it was just that, like, that pompous attitude of like, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
have fun and do this, and holy crap, checkmate.
yeah. And and because it wasn't traditional, there was no traditional to it. And that's how he would have played our one-on-one that I just went willy-nilly and just decided to go for the fast checkmate just to see if he would be like, would you fall for this? Because you're so 40 moves ahead of me in a middle game that you
Yeah.
didn't even pay attention that I was pulling the fastest trick in chess on you and it won. And, again, I didn't get anything other than the satisfaction of telling the story, but it was pretty funny.
Do you remember what your number one on your team, like their response? Because they were too afraid, so they wanted to
Mhm.
sacrificial lamb Bob. And
Yeah.
so when you quick checkmated this guy, did you like turn to him and be like, "Oh, that was a piece of cake"?
I just remember doing it and saying checkmate, and then everybody turned because we're all in the same room, and they all went, "What?" And they all looked at me, and I go, "Yeah, I just checkmated him." And they all looked at that guy, and that guy's hand was in his head like this, like, "Oh, I can't believe I fell for this." And it was just mass hysteria for like 10 minutes. And then I walked away and they all finished their games, but it was quite a thing.
I feel like if I play you in chess, even though you can say, "Hey, I'm gonna do it," I won't be able to recognize it, and I'll screw myself, and you'll probably still like checkmate me in 4 moves anyway. That's what I think is so
I haven't
interesting.
played in a long time, but I'm
Yeah,
excited to say that my oldest grandson, he's like 7, he's learning checkers, and I feel like he could be the kid that I'll teach
checkers,
how
the
to play
gateway
chess.
drug.
Yeah, yeah, right. It is. It is.
That's what I always find interesting. I never did competitive wrestling, but I always find it interesting because when I watch it, I go, "This is 100% chess." Like you have to know every move to every possible scenario, and the people that are the most elite and have like 6,000 tricks in the bag, those are the ones you see competing in the Olympics and everything. And it's so, yeah, it's just I don't know. We can go on forever about that, but we're gonna go back to the timeline now. We're doing. Are you did get back to baseball in high school, or you stopped because
No,
of the size?
no, I stopped when I was 12 and then played golf the next
That's right.
summer.
So now we're
Yeah.
doing golf and chess, and both on the high school team for both of these.
Yeah, I was the number one varsity player on the golf team for my last 2 seasons. Yeah.
I mean, you could argue you're also the number one player on the chess team because you after that scenario.
Well, because I beat that guy. Yeah, no, I think maybe a couple years down the road I might have been in the top three, but obviously I didn't focus on that as much as I focused on golf or whatever.
But you're having the success of having that solo presence on both the chess and the
Hmm.
golf side, and I know you keep like dating yourself and everything, but I know that even when you're in high school, there's still kind of scholarship opportunities for both of those events. So was it something to where you, for either of those, were like, this is something that could pay for school, or how was your mindset when you started doing really well at each of these?
So interestingly enough, my chess never really that opportunity I don't think ever existed back in those days, especially. But golf, there was that opportunity. Interestingly enough, my dad's best friend, son, was a even better golfer than me by quite a bit. My 9-hole average was like 37 and a half. His 9-hole average was 34, which means his average was 2 under par for 9 holes. He did get a scholarship to the University of Cincinnati to play golf. I didn't, which is fine. And interestingly enough, when I went to the University of Akron, which is where I went to college, there was a thing posted the first month about golf team tryouts, you know, like a walk on, like, because they didn't have scholarships for golf. Well, at least Akron did, and I don't think they did. And so I went to the meeting that, you're supposed to meet the coaches and talk. And the coach walked up to the front of the room and said, "If you're here today to try out for the Akron golf team, I will say this statement and then you can decide what you want to do. But if you want to play on the Akron golf team, you will eat, sleep, drink, and live and breathe golf. Your academics are second. Golf is first." And I went, "Nope." And I walked out the door because I knew that wasn't going to be, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be at the level of that my dad's friend's kid. Interestingly enough, that kid actually went to Cincinnati, flunked out the first semester, and lost the scholarship. But anyway, um, but I realized at that point I knew, okay, look, I'm going to college to get an accounting degree. I'm not here to play golf. I'm not going to go on the PGA Tour. I know how good those people are. I've seen them play. They play at Firestone every year, the World Series of Golf tournament. The Nicklases and that. There's just no way. I didn't have that kind of time, didn't have that kind of money to put into it. So I knew that was where I was done. And so it was fine. And I knew that golf would be a lifetime thing. You know, if you're in business, you're always playing golf with a client or golf outings. And so I knew that was going to stick with me. And that was kind of what my dad always said. Well, you're going to be in business, you got to do this. So I knew that wasn't my future, was never going to be sports. But I'll play for fun and exercise and camaraderie. And that's the way it kind of ended up.
I like how you said the golf business relationship is something that I've always been aware of. It's in media, it's in movies and TV shows. That's just always
Oh,
a
yeah.
part of it, and it's always like, okay, I need to start doing this. And when we go to these events, whether it's like the FSGA that we go to or somewhere else, there's always these private parties going to Top Golf. That's just always the thing. And I
Yeah.
am the worst I have the worst. I don't even call it a swing. It's so bad you can't even call it a swing. I have the worst attempt at hitting a golf ball. And my frustration of these Top Golf things is like people are hitting, trying to see, can I hit 300 yards? Can I hit 350? And I'm just like, please, Lord, can I hit triple digits? I just want to hit 100 with a driver or whatever it
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I need to get serious. But not that I've had situations that have like, I've never come across a situation where I needed to be able to play golf. I haven't. I don't know if that's like me graduating to the next tier when somebody invites me out for a round of golf. I haven't got there yet, but I'm like, I want to actually like hire like a swing coach. I want to take it serious. I want to go to Top Golf and like have confidence and be able to show off. And
Hmm.
then I don't know if I don't. We haven't really talked too much about the past 12 months for me on my end, but I'm actually recovering from a torn labrum in my right shoulder. And so
Oh,
like I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing now, which is okay if it's not, but I'm like, man, I
yeah.
swear
Right.
the day that I get somebody saying like I'll be like talking to it some future investor and he's like, "We'll talk about over a round of golf." I'm just going to text Bob and be like, "Bob, it happened. It finally happened." Uh,
Finally.
so let's go back to you were mentioning you went to school for accounting. We were kind of talking about a lot of things sports related.
Hmm.
What, and I know, well, technically speaking, with chess, I mean, with golf as well, but definitely with chess, it's very, very heavy analytical.
Hmm.
Was that the catalyst that led to the accounting degree, or is it something else that's like this is what I want to go into?
Again, I would love to tell you a beautiful analysis story about how this all tied together, but let me tell you how simple that decision was. In eighth grade, the guidance counselor said, we want you to go home and talk to your parents about what you really want to do when you graduate from high school. So I said, okay. So I went home and I sat down with my mom and dad and I said, they want me to decide what I want to do when I graduate. I said, so here's my options. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a radio disc jockey. I forget what the third one was because I love music. I thought I'd be a good teacher. And that was it. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And my dad's like, teachers don't make any money. Radio disc jockeys don't any money. You know who makes a lot of money? Accountants, because I have an accountant that plays in my golf league and he is loaded. And he goes, you should be an accountant. And if I pay for your college, that's what you're going to be. And I said, okay. I like math. So I took an accounting class, a bookkeeping accounting class that they had in high school. And I got like 104% or something in the class. I'm like, this is easy. I can do this. This is a breeze. I think I can make money at this and play golf. Ah, man, there's the decision. That's exactly how it came about.
So that's interesting that on the teaching side of things, if you got the thumbs up to be a teacher, what do you think the subject you would have taught? Would it be math?
Probably math.
Yeah.
Because I was good at math. That was definitely my specialty. So that's where the accounting and all kind of came together. But I knew I wasn't like, there's math, accounting, and then there's math, engineers, architects. I knew I wasn't that. So, um, but yeah. And the funny thing was I ended up like teaching accounting at the local colleges to night classes and I've been a teacher. And then I actually had my own disc jockey service doing weddings for 35 years. So there was my DJing thing. So I kind of did everything anyway. So it kind of worked out.
When you were going to school for accounting, was there other extracurricular activities you were doing that was getting you interest into other things? Like, I know you said the teaching thing before and the passion
Mhm.
for music, and I know you just kind of mentioned that you actually was doing that stuff after the fact, after college. But were things happening in college where you're like, okay, maybe there's a different path for me besides accounting, or you're just like, this is so easy, and on top of that, accounting's crush it in terms of making a ton of money. This is my sole focus, and there's nothing that's gonna, waver off of that.
I've always said if I would have been 5 to 10 years younger, I probably would have went into computers because I really love computers. But in 1985, they were still programming on punch cards to write computer programs, and that was like what they called BASIC or Fortran. And but I was going to get a computer minor, and then after I took those couple classes, I'm like, ugh, no, this is awful. But if I'd have been 5 years later, where PCs maybe would have been coming into play, I probably would have went maybe a little more towards the computer side and less accounting. But that's just the way it worked out. And I ended up being very much into computers, and I worked for a computer company as a CFO for a few years, and I learned all about the internal workings and could fix my own computers, and I would fix everybody else's computers and all that kind of stuff. And still pretty tech savvy for an old guy. But yeah, that would it could have been certainly computers very easily. It just wasn't the timing wasn't there for it.
Now, I know you've kind of mentioned there's a bunch of different jobs you've had from college to now and everything, but out of college, what was that first real world job opportunity that you had?
So my first job out of college is I was an internal auditor for a jewelry company that was based in Cleveland called JB Robinson Jewelers, and they were nationally known. They were in about, I don't know, 140 malls. And so my job was to travel around the country to the malls and do little internal audits of the actual stores and their thing. And the funny thing was I had never flown on a plane until then, never stayed away from my house outside of Boy Scout camp. And so I was just like, oh, here we go. And so it was a blast for about a year and a half. And then tragic struck my family and had to come back home and be closer to home.
And then did you get so into the jeweler side of things? Was that particular industry something that was interesting to you, or was it just like, hey, this is my job, this is what I'm doing. I'm just doing the money side of things. So when you did go back home, like I don't know if like you were seeking out another jeweler to like do the same thing for them, or it's just like, hey, what are the opportunities? Like I crushed it with
Yeah.
math. Let me run your books.
No, so everybody's goal when they're going in through the accounting world in college is to work for a big four. Back then it was the big eight companies or Ernst and Young, Arthur Anderson, those kind of big firms. I didn't have the high enough grade point average to do that. So I kind of took this job out of a necessity to have a job. But then a year later, a year and a half later, when I came back home, I started working for the Ernst and Young that was in Canton. So I kind of fulfilled that dream that I wanted to do in the first place. And then, was back home in Canton where I lived and, helping my mom and my sister and that kind of stuff. So I kind of got back in. It just took a year and a half to get some experience to make me worthy of being hired by them.
And then with that opportunity, how long were you working for that company?
So then I was at Ernst& Young for about 4.5 years. Like everyone, I wanted to be on the track to being a big shot partner. And then when I saw that the big shot partners' own children didn't recognize them when they brought them in on Saturdays to say hi with their wife, I said, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to do this. And that scared the living daylights out of me. And I said, nope, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be that dad. I'm going to be someone that my kids recognize me when they see me and not even know who they are.
And so seeing that that was a path that you didn't want to take, did your how did that change your directory in terms of the I guess the accounting world, if you will?
Yeah. So then I went into what they just call private industry. So that's being a controller, CFO, high-end accountant for the companies in the area. I stayed close to home, work for, Canton-based area companies, not drive up to Cleveland or drive, where it was too far away. My kids were, I had three daughters, so they were all starting school and doing things, and I wanted to be able to go to all of those programs, the little choir concerts and stuff that, is important to their lives. And I wanted to make sure I was at all of them, if not most of them.
I know. So I'm kind of pulling back from some things that you said. You because you were trying to keep this chronological train forward, and I know you mentioned like there was a company that in the accounting space that you work for. Did you say like something like 30 plus years? Is that right?
No, I mean, I've been
Oh
an
no, it
accountant
was
now
the
for 40 years.
wedding DJ. That's what you were
Oh, the
mentioning.
wedding DJ. Yeah. That was
So
my side gig for 35 years.
at what point of you growing in the accounting space did you go? So, I mean, you're working in a field that definitely is an above average salary, which is kind of what your
Hmm.
dad was saying to get you
Yeah.
there in the first
Right.
place. But now you're like, hey, I really like this. I like numbers. I like the money I'm making. But there was this passion that I thought about back in high school that maybe I can find some time for. When did that, and I know you said like a 30, 35 year run, but when did that
Mhm.
part of this story kind of come into play?
So my senior year, about 2 months away from graduating high or college, I was sitting in like the cafeteria at the school, and I heard these kids behind me. They're all my age, but the behind me complaining that their DJ bailed out on them, and they were throwing a big party at their frat house or sorority house or something, and they needed a DJ for tonight, and what are they gonna do? And I just turn around and go, I can DJ it. They're like, do you have like two turntables? And I'm like, yeah, I can do it. And I did have two turntables on a lot of records. I did not have a two-channel mixer, so I ran out to Radio Shack and I bought a two-channel mixer, and I got paid $100 for 3 hours, and it was the most fun I've had in like forever. It was just a blast watching people have fun because of my music choices and them just letting go and just being free. And I was like, that's a lot of fun. So I called my buddy and I said, hey, we should start our own little like DJ service and like play at bars and play at weddings and parties. And he's like, oh, okay. So we did. And we went from records to cassettes to CDs to computers in 35 years. And we just kept doing it because we did a good job at it. People paid us money, and it was just a nice little side gig on a Friday or Saturday night. And I used the money to take my family on vacations that we may not have been able to afford, just, salary, buy extra things that, you know, and so, I mean, I've had a two incomes, since I've been 16 years old. So still do.
Because this man Bob's a hustler. He knows how. Going back to sports, you
Yeah.
know the effort you need to put in to get the to reap the rewards that you want. So I
Yeah.
know that DJ stuff covers a very very long spectrum, multiple decades. But
Mm.
going back on the accounting side, um, which how long was it until you got a job? Because I know you the first one was like about a year and a half. Then you got a few years here at the next one. Which was the first like? Was there one that was like a 10 year run similar to like the 30 something plus with the DJ? Was there a pretty long run, or was it just I'm working here, I like this, here's another opportunity, and just constantly like just growing? Um, I don't want to say
Yeah,
grindstone, but
I'm the person that just would, if I wasn't happy in my job for whatever reason that was, I would move. It certainly was frowned upon, but I always felt like I could go over here and make more money and be more valuable, or this company seems to have what I'm looking for in, a life work balance and sometimes, I mean, there's three or four companies that they just were sold and moved to another state. And, the jewelry company was actually bought and moved to Washington, D.C. So that was the other reason I was leaving, other than, the tragedy of my family, to come back home. But, multiple times that happened where the company just got bought and moved, and I wasn't going to move with them because, my whole family lives in a 20-mile radius of me here. So, but yeah, no, I think my longest tenure was like 5 years at one place.
Now, are all of these, so a couple of years here, a couple of years here, a couple of years here, are all these kind of in the same vicinity in terms of, I don't know, just maybe let's just say the state of Ohio and in general, because you kind of just kept hopping around the state of Ohio essentially.
It actually was just all Northeast Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, I never left the town of Canton as my home. I might drive farther, an hour, hour and 15 minutes one way to get to a job, but I never moved the family. I always stayed right here in Canton where my kids were and I was, yeah.
With all of these roles and like you said, like 5 year at the most, and I know we've kind of talked about the interesting thing about that 35-year run with all things music. I know where you are now in 2026, and you kind of alluded, we talked about it for a second here at the beginning. I'm trying to figure out from you just seeking opportunities. I'm not happy here. I'm going to find another opportunity, or I'm not getting paid as much. I'm going to find another opportunity. At what part of that time did something else come into play that wasn't DJing for side income, that wasn't the main accounting gig? Was there something else that came into play before we eventually get to the massive idea that is essentially one of the main things you're working on today? Or was there, like, yeah, what
Um,
other brain babies was circling during that time?
I will say that my wife and I bought a teacher store, retail store, like selling teacher stuff. That was her baby, was her thing. And then I just was still working in accounting. So she did that. I started playing fantasy football in 1986. So, that was already building towards where we're at now, but no real money involved. But I just, like you said, if there was something that I could do, like I said, I was a part-time teacher at a couple of the local universities, teaching night classes to adults who are accounting, finance, whether they were trying to get their their MBA or just accounting degree. I did some of that because there was a need for that and they were paying good money. So I was actually doing that with the DJ and everything else. So, like you said, I mean, if I can use my talents to make some extra money so that my family has a little bit better this or that, that's just the way I've always been raised. We didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, so I wanted to be sure that that was never going to be a problem for my family.
Continue to see a lot of parallels between you and I in terms of, hey, is there another opportunity to make more, to do something, just make more money on the side? And I mean, I'm sure we can go on hours about both of our odd jobs that we haven't even
Sure.
that we haven't even brought up yet. So I know you mentioned like in the earliest years of fantasy football being a thing, you got hooked. You were just playing just for fun, family, friends, and
Mhm.
everything. Uh, there is quite a timeline, a chunk of time from you first playing until you having this brain baby. Were there other ideas in the fantasy space that came into mind, whether you attempted them or not? Or was it mainly just, I'm having fun, and then, a few decades later, oh, hey, I have this great idea that doesn't exist yet?
Well, the consistency one certainly was the first one that came about after playing for what, 17 years, 16 years. So 86, I started playing. 2002 was when the idea for the importance of the consistency of the players making a difference on your fantasy teams. Um, our league has always been touchdown only. And so I had Shine Alexander, the league MVP 2002. He rushes for 15 touchdowns. My team in the regular season goes 7-7, and I miss the playoffs. But I'm the second highest scoring team in the league. What went wrong? So the number cruncher in me said, "All right, let's break these guys down." And I'm like, oh well, here, Shine Alexander on a Monday night game scores 5 touchdowns in the game. He scores 3 touchdowns in this game, 2 touchdowns in that game. So there's 2/3 of his touchdowns scored in 3 out of the 14 regular season games. So if he would have scored once every week, I would actually won 2 more games, made the playoffs, and possibly won the championship. All right, so let's apply that to any other scoring method and figure out how I can use this model to build better teams for my PPR leagues, my non-PPR leagues, whatever the case may be. And so started this, Excel, creating stuff like that. Then my brother-in-law at the time, he's into computers and writing stuff in um, not Excel, whatever the database was called back then. I can't think of it now. Um, but and then so he was helping me create a model to make this calculate automatically and stuff. So that's where that really kicked in. I wrote for a number of different companies, various people met throughout that process. The Howard Benders, Bob Harris's, folks who gave me an opportunity or invited me to be in the league. And I've always said that time frame for me is what I'm trying to help kind of now pay forward with the expo is helping young people, new people in the industry with good ideas to get them some exposure, some introductions to people that may help them, do something more in their future with it. And that's kind of where that all started.
Do you remember the exact, let's just call it like the aha moment of this is fun. I know there's more people than just me and my friends in this league that I've been doing forever that have the same interests as me. Um, Internet's becoming for fantasy sports is just not only the internet's also booming, but fantasy sports on the internet, not having to
Mhm.
check the box scores of the paper every Sunday or every Monday morning to see what your guys did. When what year kind of like do you remember like what you were doing like where you're like man I feel like this would be really cool if the people with similar interests were kind of like hung out and not only just talked about fantasy football but also competed. Like, let's get the best guy in this league from Florida to come to this place and versus the best guy from all these states, like all these big fantasy heads. Like, how did that exact idea come, and roughly what time frame was that looking like?
So in 2011, I was writing for a site called Roto Experts. And that company at the time had some of the now biggest names. Scott Engel was the main guy, Adam Ronis, Dr. Roto, Jonathan Impemba, gosh, who else? Jake Seeley. Like it was just like this super team, and I was in it. And they threw a fantasy football expo at the Atlantic City Convention Center. And so I got to go, and I learned basically everything not to do at an expo.
What were
And
some? What was some? What's a few of them on that list?
Number one, don't charge too much because people can't afford to go. Booths were, and back then were terribly expensive. It was, I think, $90 for a 1 day ticket. Um, but the biggest problem is they had in the back of the room for both days autograph sessions every hour with local New York Jets and New York Giants players, former players. So what was happening was people were paying the $90 to get in and bring their stuff to get autographed, and then they walked right back out the door and never stopped once at any of the fantasy booths. Jeff Ratcliffe told a story and he's told me before too. Him and Mike Clay were on stage for a panel discussion, and there were 2 people in the crowd to watch them. It was too expensive, too big, um, because it was New York, and I'm sure they had to, that was expensive to get the Atlantic City Convention Center. And, so from that, I learned to let's make it smaller, let's make it less expensive, let's focus on anybody who can afford to be there, whether they're a startup or they're NBC Sports, and let's just do it that way. And so that's was really my first introduction to an expo. And I didn't know other ones were going on. Paul Charchian put on an expo for 5 years in 1995 through 2000 in Minnesota. I didn't even know about it. So, then of course, Tony Romo did his big thing in Dallas, and everybody talked about how expensive that was and how it was all about the autographs. And, so those are things that I've said I would never do. Is like, I'm not bringing a Hall of Famer in just for autographs so people can just come in and get an autograph and not focus on the real idea, which is the fantasy football. So that's where I learned a lot of stuff there, for sure.
After learning the do's and the don'ts, how long did it take you to say, I think I can do this? I don't know if the word is better, but do this and make this make more sense for the actual people who would be wanting to attend these things. How long did that take you to turn it into an actual idea?
So 2016, I finally talked the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, into working with me to do not necessarily an expo. I just called it a fantasy football day, just a 1 day event. And I'd been talking to them for a number of years prior to that because it was in my head of like, I have Hall of Fame, this whole Hall of Fame thing here. Why do we not have something here to put this together? So finally, I got somebody's attention and they decided to allow it to happen. So they brought in three Hall of Famers. It was Warren Moon, Anthony Munoz, and Chris Dolman. I brought in like Bob Harris, Mike Clay, Radcliffe, Fabian, and we had a 1 day event. Again, the problem was they wanted too much money. So they wanted to charge $399 for 1 day. And 2 weeks before the event was supposed to actually happen, they had sold two tickets. And so they called me, and I had told them from the beginning, don't make this more than like $100. It's not going to fly. So they changed it. We ended up getting about 60 people. And the event was great. People loved it. They told the Hall of Fame what a great thing it was, but the Hall of Fame wanted an absorbent amount of money to put it on again. And I said, I don't have that kind of money, so we just didn't do it. And I kept working on them to try to do something, but it just fell on deaf ears because they just didn't want to take, you know, do that. And so that's when I finally, basically and decided, well, look, how about if I just do it myself and I'll just rent your facilities and see what happens.
Hmm. $3.99 for something that also for like the first time something happens, like if it's
Yeah,
something where it's like 20 years old and you're getting tons of people like and you want to up it up a little bit, it is what it is, but like the very
right.
first time, like, oh hey, $400, I'm like, holy crap, I gotta pay for a hotel, I gotta pay for a flight and then all that
Exactly.
stuff. It's a thousand
Yeah.
dollar trip for 1 day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's whenever I people that have never been to the Fantasy Football Expo, because I think I've been 3 years now. The number one thing I say to people in the industry that I see at all these conferences and all these expos, these B2B business expos on the sports betting and fantasy sports spaces, like it's such a unique beast in terms of like how like there's no it's just if you go to this one for business reasons and if you want to just hang out with people, like go to the Fantasy Football Expo. Like I
Mhm.
think it's probably the I don't. it's definitely the biggest fantasy football community gathering, but I think it might be like one of the biggest like sports fans gatherings even. And I mean, I know it's getting bigger every year, and I love to see what you're doing with it. So now we have this brain baby, we have this idea. You tried it out. Year one, very weird. The last 48 hours leading up to it, with them trying to charge an arm and a leg. Then you go, well, you know what? I don't think I need you. I'm gonna actually just rent it out and do everything myself. Um, the what year again was that first one, that 399 one?
Oh, that was 2016.
So 2016 happens. Then is it immediately the following year you're like, I'm gonna do this? How many years did it
No,
take?
yeah, no, I put it out of my head. I mean, I put it out of my head that I was going to do something because I really had to, I mean, mentally had to like, I got to think this all the way through. 2018 is where the first step happened. And you talked about this a little bit earlier, the Kings Classic. So, fantasy baseball for years had been doing these two big best of the best drafts called the Tout Wars and Labor. And Labor is an acronym, but and they would be in New York. They would be on Sirius XM, usually in live drafts. And so 2018, I just happened to be listening to the draft and it clicked for me. I'm like, that's it. That's how I start this. Let me create the football version of this at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And so at this point now, I've got enough street cred in the industry. I know Mike Clay, I know Brad Evans, Bob Harris, Andy Behrens, Dave Richard, those kind of guys. I've met them at various other things. So I email Mike and Dave, or yeah, Mike and Dave, I think first. And I'm like, hey guys, I've got this idea. We really should have a best of best draft like baseball does. How would you like if I could set up the draft at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in their like Gold Jacket Lounge room and get SiriusXM to come and do it like a full day? We'll do a snake draft and an auction draft so we can really get the full venue of the of the people and the players. And funny enough, within 5 minutes, Mike Clay forwards me an email that Brad Evans had sent to him the week before that said, we should have a best of best draft. I just don't know where to hold it. And as they say, the rest is history. So I email all so an email blast goes out to all the guys. They all reached out to Marcus Grants and all this stuff. And funny, Marcus Grant said when he got the call from Brad Evans, and Brad said, "Hey, we're going to have an industry draft, best of best." Marcus said, I was this close to going, no, I'm not interested. And then he said it was at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I go, when is it? And so, so we put it together. They all came. We did the draft. We had two leagues, two 12-team leagues the first year. Um, it was a huge success. We were like King's Classic, we were literally trending on Twitter that day. It was so much stuff and hype and social media love. And so that night we're at local BW3s. We're all hanging out. And I go, guys, thank you so much for coming in. I'm really honored that you guys would do this. I said, I've got this idea that next year we'd like add an expo to it the next day and have like panel discussions, trade show booths. Would some of you be interested in sticking around and being a part of that? And they all loved the idea. And they said, they would do the best they could. So then 2019 becomes the first official expo. We called it the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo because Tony Romo still had his national fantasy football convention. So I didn't want to call it anything like national. I thought I will make sure it's just, we're the Midwest one. So if anybody, you know, and then Tony's went away. So I just took the Midwest out and called it the Fantasy Football Expo.
I know you kind of mentioned this that you mentioned Twitter for like a hot second about like trending on Twitter, and I think that is one of my most interesting things that I've learned about this. This like it's weird because it's not necessarily like you didn't create the fantasy football community, but you at the same time did create a fantasy football community, or you gave people a community essentially to chat. And something that I find most interesting, ever since I went to my first one, is there's a Twitter DM group where people that attend this annually, whether it's people that create content or people that are just fans of fantasy football and everybody in between, but this group is like active every day of the year.
Yeah.
So it's just there's so many interesting things about what you put together. But a question I have is, so you said about what the first official mid one was Midwest, and did you say it was 2019?
2019. Yeah, we had 30 booths that were sold, but we only had like 75 attendees.
It's more than the 399 into crap. We need to change this, and you got the 60 there.
Yes.
But the question is, through the success of since that 2019 one, and then how it's grown every year since, has it ever? It has to have entered your brain to do something along the lines of, "What if we do this for fantasy baseball?" As like that, that's had to have came into the Bob brain at one point, right?
So I got a good story for that one.
You
So
take all the
about
time you need. This podcast is for you.
yes. So a couple of years ago, my best friend, who I was telling you about earlier from high school, he was on a trip with folks from the Pro Football Hall of Fame and other business leaders from Canton, and they flew over and visited the Fantasy Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown to see how they were laid out before this whole village was going to be built. My buddy walks in the door. The person that is there for the tour is talking to one of the other people, and they said, "Hey, is any of these people know anybody who's associated with the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton?" And my buddy said, "I just froze. Like, wait, what?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's my best friend, Bob Lung." And they're like, "Oh, can you give me his name and number? We'd like to talk to him." Never got a phone call.
You think there's an outside the box chance that they either could not read the phone number or maybe one digit was missing? Or do you think that's definitely not the scenario?
I don't know. It's a very good. So, have I thought about an expo in Cooperstown? Yes, but the problem would be this. We do it a month or two in front of football season starting. If you do an expo a month or two in front of baseball season, everybody's going to New York, Cooperstown in February may not be as fun as an idea as it seems. Now, I know that there is something that is held every year in November down in out in Arizona. It's called the First Pitch. It was started many years ago by a gentleman named Ron Chandler, who was inducted into the FSGA Hall of Fame a few years back. A very good friend and mentor of mine through my years. And it's kind of a fantasy baseball expo, but it's not really for fans. It's just content creators come, they hang out, they watch some of the fall ball leagues in Arizona. There is some discussion about, fantasy baseball and trends, and I think they have some discussions, but it's more just a for fun. When I retire in a few years, I'm planning on going out and hang with them just because I know a lot of the guys that are there. Um, so, is there a chance we could turn that into an expo in November? Maybe, but at this point, yeah, probably not in my future, but never say never.
I like how you were when you were referencing it. You kind of said like it's not really for fans. It's mainly for the people, the content creators, and that is, I think, one of the biggest uniquenesses, if that's even a word, of the expo is that like you can just be a fan of fantasy football and show up, and then you're going to be you could be in a league against somebody that you maybe have been reading their articles or watching their YouTube series
Right.
for forever. And how
Mhm.
many I know you mentioned originally it was just like these two leagues, this auction league, the snake draft. What's planned for this year? How many individual leagues are drafting at this year's expo?
Well, we currently have seven or eight that the King's Classic became more. So we had our first two, 12 teams each. Next year went to 14 teams each, still those two. Then in the third year, I added a international league. so that people from fantasy content creators like Murph and Hannah Rowland and some of these people from England and Germany and Ireland and who are writing content internationally could draft in a online draft. So we created a third division for Kings Classic, and it was half international and half new US. And then we added the Queen's Classic. Then we added a IDP Dynasty or an IDP Kings Classic, a Dynasty Kings Classic, and then this past year we created our first ever Fans Classic, where we actually had a fan, their favorite fan was chosen by all of the big names, Howard, Bob Harris, Andy Barron, whoever. And those 14 people drafted against each other right in the Hall of Fame, right beside us in the same rooms. And then the winner, whose name's Mike Quansell, is now coming this year, and he will get to sit beside Brian Drake, who was his fan favorite, to watch him do the live Kings Classic right there in the Hall of Fame as well. And then each year we have a new qualifier, so there's a new 14 team fans who are going to draft again. And so we're just going to keep that rotating so that the fans can be right there with their favorite person. So that's all of them. And then you throw in Draft Night Out, which is Seth Wilcox. I think he has 14 or 15 leagues. So yeah, you're looking at probably close to 20 leagues drafting all day Saturday at the expo. So it's been quite a growth.
Yeah, that's that's quite the level up there. Um, Something I was going to mention as well is I just love talking about all the different unique things that the expo offers that you don't get anywhere else. There's one of my favorite things that I'm slightly working on my end as well is the fact of having it doesn't matter who you are, you can come to this. Like I
Hmm.
don't care if you've never written an article or done a single video on TikTok, whatever it may be. If you are a fan of what this is, you can come to this. Something that I always interested me. I was never good enough to get to a FanDuel or DraftKings live final, but when they like the ones that you would have like the Playboy Mansion, so the entire NFL season you can win a ticket, and then the Playboy Mansion is just this massive gathering of people who not necessarily content creators, they're just good enough to get a ticket and to get in here.
Hmm.
I was like, man, that's so interesting. And then I think that I learned about that before I learned about the expo, and then I don't know if you're familiar with Spanky and what he does in Vegas. One of the most well-known social media cappers, or I don't even call it social media, just cappers in general. He has something in
Hmm.
Vegas called the Bet Bash, and it's essentially kind of the same thing where it's the sports betting side of uh, content creators and just fans. And I didn't realize that's what it was going to it. I thought it was somewhat industry heavily focused. I remember I was sitting at a bar where in the I think it was just at the Circa, and it's the bar that has all like the video poker stuff in front of you. And
Hmm.
there's a guy to my left and the guy to my right, and I was like, oh, so what do you do? And he's talking about how he's like a plumber, and I was like, no, 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 but like, who do you like? What site do you create content for? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, do you do anything in this space besides playing? He goes, no, no, no. I go, okay, so what? So you're why are you here? He goes, well, I'm here just because I love betting on sports and I love meeting other people, and not anything knock against these guys showing up for that, but that's not like I don't know if I just misread online. I go, oh, so this is just the gathering of fans. I go, well, I love that this exists, and I love the fantasy football exists, and I don't know. I think I may have mentioned to you. Uh, I'm recording this on a Monday. This is going to be airing the following Tuesday, but this Saturday is the 24-month, the 2-year anniversary of PlayerProps.ai, and I'm not trying to make a at the moment anyway, anything like an expo, fantasy football expo, or the Bet Bash. But what I'm doing, I like that community aspect, and so a year ago I threw a party in Orlando, Florida, where I was like,
Yeah, I
hey,
remember seeing the pictures.
yeah, I'm like, if you, I don't, if you're a premium member, whether it's been a month or whatever, the full year, if you can make it to Orlando, Florida, I'm renting out the space, covering all the food and drink as a thank you. And so we're kind of do the same thing again.
Cool.
This coming Saturday, we're renting out an entire space, but then of course we have a lot of growth, so a lot more people are coming in, and I don't know, maybe it's to a point where probably asking you, being the brains behind this crazy expo idea that's exploded as much as it has, to be like maybe I take this from being a premium thank you community thing to, hey, let's just have a day where people meet up somewhere and just hang out and talk sports betting or whatever it may be. So who knows what that
Yeah.
becomes? But
Yeah.
it's always something where I'm always thinking about, like, if Bob were to do this, what would this look like? What would Bob
Oh,
do? WWBD. What would
BD.
Bob do?
That's it. What would Bob do? Yeah.
But yeah, so essentially, we kind of caught ourselves up here to 2026 with what everything you're working on. What I like wrapping these podcast episodes up with is for you to look through the entire timeline of playing baseball from age 9, 12, crushing it. What did you say? Like an 88-4 record, something
Yeah.
ridiculous that sounds like it's video game fake numbers, all the way to 2026 Expo having almost upwards of 20 plus drafts and all these people attending. There's a lot of things that happen both inside and outside of your control that we attribute to, or I like to call butterfly effects. Out of
Hmm.
every single event from 9 years old playing baseball all the way to 2026, if you were to credit one individual event, one butterfly effect, whether it was in or out of your control, to led you to where you are today, what is that one event that you would attribute to the success you have now?
I would say, without a doubt, it was the baseball because the year before I started playing as an 8-year old, um, I didn't make the team. I couldn't hit a ball to save my life. Um, and I just didn't have much confidence as a child. Um, you know, there wasn't, in today's world, you have so many things that you can invest yourself in very quickly, whether it's video games, whether it's computers, there's just so many things. Where back then you didn't have a lot of opportunities, especially somebody from a small town. We had money, we had enough money to live, but we were certainly didn't have much. You just did things on your own, and the next year, interesting enough, why I couldn't hit the broadside of a bar of the baseball was because I was blind. I didn't, not blind, but I needed glasses. So I get glasses. The next year I can hit. Next year I'm on this team. And then that whole working hard to be the best and then be the best was just literally injected into me to a point where there was no stopping me in whatever I wanted to do because I knew that if I just work hard and I persevere and I continually strive to be better, to do better, whether it was helping people, putting an event together, being a DJ, whatever, that had to be that scenario because if that doesn't happen, I don't know what what would have been the trigger to make that happen because at that point now I have confidence. I have confidence to be better at golf. I have confidence to be better at this and that, chess, counting, DJ, whatever. And I feel like that was the biggest by far. The other one little thing that we didn't talk about, but I want to bring up is some point in my business career, there was a seminar or something I was at, and I don't remember, but I want to say it was in my younger part of my career, 20s, 30s. And this person brought up the term FANAFI, and it stands for find a need and fill it. And it was about the seminar was about identifying things at work that you see a need for that nobody else is taking the incentive or the step to do it and do it and show your worth by thinking outside the box, but just doing something that needs to be done and no one else is doing it. So you see that need, you fill it because you see, and then that just kind of was the second click to the DJ thing. Hearing a person complain they needed a DJ, hearing that we don't have a fantasy football national, convention or not convention, a best of the best. Oh, there's a need. Let's fill it. Hey, nobody does anything about consistency and how important is fantasy football. There's a need. Fill it. So I feel like those two things are probably what is who created who I am today.
I think as when you were going over that first topic, I was like, so your butterfly effect is your parents took you to the eye doctor.
It basically could have been that because it certainly helped my schoolwork too because I couldn't see the blackboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that was the key is that I could finally see.
It's very hard to hit a baseball when you can't see the baseball.
Yeah, at
So
least not
Bob,
very well.
I want to thank you very much for hopping on here
Oh,
and sharing your
thank you,
entire
man.
story here with us. For those who have watched this episode and aren't familiar with the Fantasy Football Expo, just give a little. How do they find out more about it?
Go to thefantasyfootballexpo.com. You can get tickets there. You can find out about it. You can find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. Ask me questions. Email me. If you can't find any of my stuff, reach out to Travis. I'm sure he can put you in contact with me. And hopefully, we'll see you and everybody else in Canton, Ohio, July 24th to 26th.
All right, Bob, thanks again. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to this channel for all the other ones coming out in the future. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thanks.